Lover of all things lit, professional reviewer, recommender, book blogger. I am your host, Lloyd Russell, aka The Book Sage, and you're listening to Lit with Lloyd, courtesy of KCAT Radio. Welcome to Lit with Lloyd. I am your host, Lloyd Russell, and our guest author today, courtesy of KCAT Radio, is Meredith Jaeger. Meredith is the author of 3 books, including The Pilot's Daughter, which just came out last month. Welcome, Meredith. It's great to have you here, and it's nice to see you again.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're going to start by talking about your first 2 books. Tell us about your first 2 books, what they're about, and then we'll talk about the latest one.
Okay, sure. So my first 2 books are both dual narrative, dual timeline historical fiction, where there's a story, a mystery set in the past, and then a story in the present where both storylines come together. The first one, my debut, The Dressmakers Dowry, is set in San Francisco, both in present day and in 1876. An immigrant seamstress goes missing in the 1870s storyline. Her friend goes searching for her, and then it brings up themes of class disparity and income inequality, which are still very prevalent in San Francisco today. I was working for a tech company at the time, and I just wanted to draw attention to the history of San Francisco. All I ever heard at lunch was people talking about angel funding and their startups. I thought, there are ships buried underneath the streets. There used to be saloons and opium dens, so I wanted to throw it way back.
Wow.
So there's a journalist in the present day who uncovers this storyline, and then it all ties together with some dark secrets in the family she married into.
Wow. How did you come up with this storyline?
I had tried unsuccessfully to get an agent when I was younger for 2 contemporary novels, just straight women's fiction in the same vein of Emily Giffin or Jennifer Weiner. And that just wasn't what was selling at the time. It was 2009. It was the vampire craze. So I was writing in the wrong genre, but I didn't know it. And so then I read a dual narrative novel, and I thought, hey, maybe I should be brave enough to try my hand at historical, even though I'm not a historian. I was in Greece on my honeymoon, so it wasn't like the surroundings inspired it. I just had been working so hard that whole year. I finally had the time and the space to think. So, and the jet lag was working in my favor. I was up really early. Yeah.
Wow, that's really great. Tell us about the second book.
Yeah, so the second book is Boardwalk Summer. This one is set in Santa Cruz, which is very nearby, and also where I got my diploma. I have a bachelor's in modern literature from UC Santa Cruz. And so, yeah, I think it's a wonderful town. And I'd read an article in the SF Gate about an archivist at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk who was just talking about the hundreds of years of, 100 years of historical artifacts that are there. And it really inspired me. And as I was reading this article, I just had this vision of a girl coming into contact with an artifact and then it tying into a story, a sad story from the past. So they used to hold the pageants there, beauty pageants, like before it went to Atlantic City. And so I have a beauty queen, an aspiring beauty queen, Violet, in the 1940s, who everything looks great on the outside, but she's actually in a very unhappy marriage. And so I don't want to give anything away about that plot.
Correct.
But, in the modern day, it's set actually in 2007 because that was the actual centennial celebration of the boardwalk. So she's an aspiring historian. She is working there and she reads a newspaper article about Violet saying that she died by suicide, and she thinks that's so sad. But then the more she digs, she starts to doubt if it's true. And so you read that one. So then,
yes, I did.
Both stories come together in the end.
Yeah, I'm a little embarrassed to say I have not read The Dressmaker's Dowry. And your third one, which you're going to talk about,
yes,
has just come out. So I have a little leeway there, but I have no excuse for number one. I will get to it.
That's okay. Get to this one. This is the new one.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about this one. It's been out since November 2nd. and tell us about the storyline and how you came to write it.
Absolutely. So this is the first book I've set in New York. I'm a California native, Bay Area native, born and raised in Berkeley, California. So this was a stretch for me, and it was really important to get the historic details right. But I've heard from my agent, from my editor, native New Yorkers, that they felt it was very authentic. So that was, reassuring. But yeah, I love The Great Gatsby. That was one of my favorite books when I was younger, and then I read it again as an adult. Had a totally different take than when I was, 15, 16, but still love it. And so this one, a woman during World War II, her pilot father goes missing. He's missing in action. She desperately wants closure, wants to believe that he's still alive, finds letters in his jacket pocket when the army ships his belongings 6 weeks later. And they're not from her mother. They're love letters from a mysterious woman in New York. So she suspects he might have a second family, he might still be alive, decides to enlist the help of her aunt, who she's much closer to than her mother. And then in the process finds out that her aunt had this whole secret life in the 20s as a Ziegfeld Follies showgirl. And she has kept her past hidden from her family because she is concerned. She thinks it was her actions in those days. She believes they might have inadvertently led to murder. And the murder is based on a true unsolved murder cold case of 1923 of the Broadway Butterfly. So I just went deep into historical research on this one, and was also fascinating because we were in the pandemic as I wrote this. So I think I really bonded with the 40s character Ellie and everyone who was left behind during World War II, where you have all these loved ones fighting on the front lines. There's death all around, but you're not, in America up close and personal with that. And I just thought about the doctors, the nurses, the paramedics, everyone who was really there. And then all we were told to do is just stay home, isolate. It was such a stressful time, but it helped me relate with, I think those World War II restrictions and some of what that fear must have felt like. Yeah.
And this is your first one that actually centers on one of the wars.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I think, a touch of World War II in Boardwalk Summer because it is 1940, but it doesn't go into it too much. And same here. So the books that I have that focus on the war, it's here on the home front, not like one of the spy novels set in Europe. So that's what makes it pretty different. Yeah.
So just talking about that element for a moment. We all have access to tons of World War II related historical fiction. Two authors that I read that just focus on other elements of history are Renee Rosen and Marie Benedict. I don't know if you've read either one of them.
I've heard both. I think I've read Marie Benedict, yeah.
Okay. They write historical fiction about things that are not war related. It's kind of a nice departure from the typical historical fiction novel. I remember enjoying Boardwalk Summer so much because of that in part, but also because it was such an interesting storyline. There's a lot of historical fiction that has nothing to do with wars.
Yes.
So I think that's great that you've tapped into that. Okay, so you wrote two contemporary novels. We can call them women's fiction, or we can call them contemporary novels, which I prefer. What made you depart from those to go into historical fiction? And is it possible to resurrect the first two novels?
I get asked that a lot. And the thing is, imagine that you are playing an instrument, you're learning to play piano, and suddenly you're so much better than you were. You wouldn't want someone to hear your terrible old recordings. So at the time, of course I was devastated that I'd accumulated all these agent rejections. But now every time I get asked that, I'm like, thank goodness they never saw the light of day. They're so weird. Aside from, a trusted critique partner who's read them, maybe some family members. No, I don't want to share them. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second question? I've already forgotten.
I think that was it. I mean, what led you into historical fiction?
Into historical. My reading tastes changed. So I think that's natural, as you read, I like to read widely, and you should read within genre, but also outside of it. So I think when I was studying, like some of my literature courses, they were, focused on the literary canon, and I felt like I was cheating on my syllabus with Bridget Jones's Diary and all these very light books that I loved. But no, as I got older, like I discovered more authors, started reading more psychological thriller and historical. I think, I had read Orphan Train by Christina Baker Klein, and it was phenomenal.
It was so good.
She's still one of my favorite authors, just incredible. And I thought, oh my gosh, I aspire to do that level of research. I think I'd also read a novel at the time by Sarah Geo, and that was dual narrative. It was called Blackberry Winter.
Yep,
and
I read that.
Yeah, it was set modern day journalist, and then a story in the 30s, and that really was the one where I felt like, if she can do this, I can do this. I'm going to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Sarah Geo, did you ever read Goodnight June?
No, I haven't read that
one.
one.
That is so good.
Okay.
Really good. So you've got the 3 historical fiction novels. Have you been with the same agent, editor, publisher for those 3? And how did you get published with the first one?
That is such a good question. So I have been fortunate enough to be with my same agent. Some people write a brilliant first book and they sign on right away with an agent. That was not my case, as you know. I spent several years, 6 years querying first those 2 books that I had to shelve. Then I took a year off writing because I was just so disappointed in myself. I had this hope to be on a 30 under 30 list, which is so silly, but it really mattered to me.
Yes.
And so when I realized I was not only going to be unpublished by 30, but also unagented, I just thought, this is the worst birthday ever. And went to go see Magic Mike with friends, which is very good for cheering up. And so then I got the idea for, then I got married, had the idea for the Dressmakers Dowry, and thought, I'm really going to take my time with this one. I think I'd queried too quickly with the others. Like, you're just so eager to put it out there. So yeah, and I got from my agent, Jenny Bent, what's known as a revise and resubmit request. This means the agent wants you to make some changes. If you make the changes, it's not guaranteed that they'll sign you. I just wanted someone to partner with me to make the best possible book. She loved the story set in the past. She thought the modern story could use some more oomph. And she said, make it darker, introduce black male. So it's like these guidelines that you don't really know how to fulfill. So I worked hard on her changes with my critique partner. And I was working full time for a different San Francisco tech company. And I remember I was in line at Pete's before work when I got the email that said, I want to offer representation. And I just about, screamed in that Pete's, and I was so excited. So it took me 6 years to get the agent. Once I signed with Jenny, then it actually moved quickly. We did some revisions, and I think just a month later we sold it to HarperCollins. So that was really fortunate. So the first 2 are with William Morrow, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. And then for this new one, I switched over to Penguin Random House, to Dutton. So new editor, but same agent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable telling us why you decided to change for book 3?
Oh my gosh. Well, it was actually when I had this idea, my former editor, I couldn't sell her on it. I really believed in it. My agent Jenny believed in it. And as it was, she felt it wasn't the best fit. I think she wanted me to go in a slightly lighter direction. And she, was great. And that was a really hard decision to make, because I thought, am I ending my whole career over believing in this one weird book idea? But Jenny and I both liked the idea. And so, yeah, it was a tough decision at the time, but she didn't want this book. And I thought maybe someone else does. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you certainly did not go down a step by getting over to Penguin.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always very nerve-wracking. There are no guarantees in this business.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In terms of the next book,
yes.
Do you have any kind of deal with Penguin Random House, or will you have to shop it out again?
They have an option, so they will take first look. I've had a great Zoom meeting with my editor who's excited about the idea. But then from a business point of view, it always depends on your sales. And I'm glad I'm on radio. That's why we do public outreach.
Yes,
saying,
indeed.
Please, it's the holidays. Or I guess if this airs in January, it'll be past. But books are always a great gift. So yes, I very much hope that Dutton will buy it. I know that my editor is excited about it, but there are more factors that go into play than just it being an idea. everyone
yeah.
likes. Yeah.
How far along are you with the next one? And can you tell us I know you can. Do you want to tell us what it's going to be about?
I will say, I finished the research writing. I need to dive into that. Yeah, this one will be set in California again. It's going to focus on urban renewal in the 70s, issues of racism and redlining, and then also on the female inmates of San Quentin in the early 1900s.
Oh,
Because
wow.
there used to be women in the prison until the 30s. So that's all I'm going to say, but it'll
Yes.
be, another California original.
Wow. And another dual.
Another dual perspective.
Yeah. That sounds great. How long do you typically take to write a book?
You know, and there's so as a working mom, like it's so hard. And when I worked full time, I could only write on weekends, but I didn't have a kid, so at least I knew I had every weekend free to do what I wanted. And my husband was fine with it. He does his own thing. And so I could usually do a draft in about 4 to 6 months. Then once my daughter was born and I was under contract for Boardwalk Summer, that was incredibly stressful. And I remember she was a little baby and I would wear her in the ergo and type, and it was so bad for my back. But it was like I had to take any snippet of time that I got whenever she fell asleep. I've never had a nanny. I wish. The Bay Area is an expensive place. So, and same now. Like I don't pay for a nanny. I don't pay for after school care. So now I pretty much get until 1:40 when it's time to pick her up from school. And so, just carving out time, begging my mom, who's still in Berkeley, to do some grandma camp. So, I'm hoping again to focus and get a clean draft finished in 4 to 6 months, but we'll see.
Yeah.
The whole thing, you work on it then with more people, with your agent, with your editor, go through revisions. So it takes at least a year to have something decent that's, printable.
Yeah. But I imagine it takes a long time to do the research, and you have finished that.
Yes, that I was doing over the summer, and that was a lot of fun. I was really, doing a lot of reading at the time. So the research can take a while, but it's so much fun. You have to love it. Otherwise, you shouldn't be writing historical.
Yeah. It's such a great genre.
Yeah.
Have you had any interest from movie or TV studios for any of the books?
Oh gosh, not that I know of. They are welcome to get in contact with my publicist. Sometimes you'll get, weird things on Twitter where someone's claiming to be a producer and you're like, no, I don't see the blue check next to your name. So I've definitely gotten some what I would qualify as weirdos saying they work in Hollywood, but I don't think they actually do.
Yeah. I guess everything is automatically a scam until proven otherwise.
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right. So besides your agent and editor, do you have others that are early readers for you?
Yes, I in the past I worked closely with an author friend of mine who's an Australian author, Sally Hepworth.
Oh,
she's
I've
a huge
read her.
New York Times bestseller now.
Yeah.
Big congrats to Sally. So she's gotten really busy, but we used to always swap books. She has actually read those 2 horrible unpublished books, both of them, that will remain forever on the laptop. But no, I don't share with family because they are not professionals and they are not objective. So I know some people say, oh, my spouse reads everything. My husband doesn't get to read my books until they're published. And then he's like, I hope I'm in the acknowledgments. This time he is, and I thanked him for paying taxes and doing the boring things so that I can focus on my art. But no, I prefer author friends who I've met online to read my books. So I have a great group of female authors who write historical or write in various genres and who've offered to read, and we email. But I've never met any of them aside from Sally, who I met once in 2014 when she visited LA.
Wow. That's great. So you mentioned earlier about how upsetting, a little bit depressing it is that you can't get an agent and you get those rejection letters. You know that Gene Owl, Clan of the Cave Bear, had 64 rejections.
Oh my gosh.
And
that book, my goodness, I think my friends and I discovered that book when we were 12 and it blew our minds wide open.
We have talked to so many authors who have had a lot of success that have had a lot of rejections. when we hear about somebody that got picked up like first shot, that's the exception.
Right.
So you're in good company,
Yes.
is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Do your publishers, have they put out all your books in ebook and audiobook?
Oh, yes, definitely. And I actually got a really sweet message today from one of my friends who was a fellow mom in Alameda when I lived there. And she says, I listen to it when I'm doing all my chores, these things that I hate, like laundry and dishes, I'm now looking forward to because I'm listening to The Pilot's Daughter. And a lot of my mom friends are so busy, they only do audio. But yeah, whatever you prefer. I like reading on Kindle, ebook, audiobook, paperback. You do you.
Yeah. The audiobook, I don't know if I've ever seen any stats, but I'll bet you that it has been the most dramatic reason for increase in readers.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of all the people that don't ever read, don't take the time or don't read, but they've got all this time driving or doing something at home where they're not using the brain. I mean, they're fantastic.
They are fantastic. Absolutely. And it's like some people just process information that way. My husband prefers audio. Yeah. And so he's, always listening to podcasts and things. And so, I think some of us who can just sit still and enjoy the act of reading, but when the world is so busy, and your book is competing for attention among Netflix, among like Instagram Reels or TikTok, all these things that provide like instant gratification. So it is harder to convince people to sit down and focus, read.
Yeah. I mean, even in the movie theaters, the first run movies are only in for a week or two before they start streaming.
Yeah.
So, that's, of course, greatly affected the movie industry in a negative way, whereas I think audiobooks has impacted in a very positive way.
Definitely. And it's so cool, the craft of voice actors. Like with each audiobook, I get some different samples from various voice actors, and I can choose among usually 5 people who I think sounds the most like the character to me. And so then there's that person putting their spin on it and interpreting your story. And especially when you have accents, like I chose a narrator when I had the German narrator in Dressmakers Dowry, and I had a woman named Barry Kreineck who's just incredible with accents. And she did the German accent. She did some of Sally's novels, does a fantastic Australian accent. So yeah, pretty cool.
When we've talked to authors that have big name publishers like you do, they normally don't get a say on their narrators, but it sounds like you actually get to pick.
I don't source them, so they come to you with who they've already picked and say,
and you
we would be fine if you chose among this group of people we've already vetted. Yeah.
Well, that's good. And what about book covers? How are those handled?
Book covers are fascinating. So book covers, the design team usually presents something. And in my case, I've never liked the original, and neither has my agent. So there's been a lot of back and forth, and it stresses me out because I never want to be the difficult client. But also a cover matters.
Absolutely.
People choose a book by its cover. So my sister, who has worked in graphic design for a really long time, she taught me a trick a while ago and said, go on stock images. Even these big companies, she's worked for several tech companies, they source from iStock photo. Like, go on there, find something that you want, and that'll get them set in the right direction. So I've done that every time. Searched iStock photo, sent some images to the design team and said, this is what I'm looking for. Like, please, I know it exists. Don't say it doesn't exist because I just found, this image of a city or this image of a woman. And then every time that's helped get it together really quickly. So yeah, each one I had a pretty big hand in, sort of setting the tone and getting it the way that I was happy with.
That's fantastic, because I mean, we really have had authors that have said they have no input at all.
Yeah.
So that's great. Did you negotiate, or did your agent negotiate
so much negotiating? Like, my agent would say just the most harsh things off the record. So she'd call me and say, this is hideous. It looks like an Amish romance. And then of course we can't say that because it would hurt everyone's feelings on the team. And so then it's like, how do you reinterpret that in a way that sounds better? You're like, oh, this is not a little old-fashioned, not quite, what we're going for.
Yeah. It's funny because we actually have an author who writes Amish romance.
Yeah.
And of course, every book cover has that
Right.
particular hat.
And if that's your genre,
yeah.
then that's great because it's showing someone it's your genre. But if you're trying to appeal to like upmarket book club, you don't want it to look like Amish romance. You want it to look like, what's going to pick someone's eye at the airport and think, okay, this looks, yeah.
By the way, we grew up in the same area.
Oh.
I grew up in Albany.
Oh, awesome.
And then moved to Oakland.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I know the area you're talking about.
Yes. I'm very close to Albany now because we were fortunate enough to buy a house in Richmond. So we're in the Richmond Annex. And yeah, I know. Albany, El Cerrito, Berkeley, Oakland, it's all home.
Yeah, it really is. That's great. Do you have authors that were big influences on you and your writing?
Yes. I mean, I think my favorite author still is Leanne Moriarty. Not so much on my own writing. I just think she's phenomenal. She has you laughing on one page and then crying in the next. Like her ability to write characters with such emotional depth and to write these amazing domestic thrillers or, mysteries, but then with such heart. So she is still one of my favorites. Big Little Lies was a favorite book long before it was made into the HBO series. Yes. And then in terms of historical, I love Christina Baker Klein. Just finished The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna.
Excellent
that was
book.
Phenomenal. And I think her ability to show, events that happened in the past, the Great Depression, and it correlates so closely with what's going on today. I think that is the most important thing where, all of these migrants from Oklahoma, they're living in a homeless encampment and facing so much prejudice, and the migrant workers are trying to unionize, and putting their lives at risk. And it's like these things still matter. These are issues that are still happening. A homeless encampment in Santa Cruz just got flooded out recently because of the rains. The first thing I thought about was that is what happened in The Four Winds to this character who you just feel for her. She's a mother. And so I love that she can spread social awareness to people who might not otherwise be thinking about these issues in a contemporary sense.
Yeah.
And that's why historical fiction is important to me, because you can look at all the atrocities of the past and show them hopefully in a way where people are thinking, let's not repeat this.
Yeah.
What can we learn so that we don't repeat this? Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of historical fiction authors. We've had many to our book club. But what you just said is probably the first thing that I've heard that really resonates with me and that I will keep in mind. Looking at the past to make sure not to repeat the mistake, in the present. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's like, I think the authors who do it really well, it's not heavy-handed. You're still having a great time. You're still reading a book for entertainment, but you're learning along the way.
Right.
So I think that number one skill is what inspires me.
Yeah.
Show someone something, make them feel something, but also keep it entertaining, keep it a page turner.
Yeah, I love that. And that's certainly true of Boardwalk Summer, and I'm sure of the other two as well, which I will find out soon enough. Okay, so we, as I mentioned to you earlier, we usually end each show with a little bit of trivia, literary trivia. Okay. So I've got some for today. The Oxford English Dictionary credits Charles Dickens with the following words: Butterfingers, Crossfire, Dustbin, Fairy Story, Slow Coach, and Whoosh. He was also credited with Boredom, but then it was taken away when it was discovered that was from somebody else a couple of years earlier. Alexander Dumas, for those that don't know, he wrote The Three Musketeers. He actually fought duels, and he fought his first duel at 23, and during the duel, his pants fell down, but he still prevailed. And the last one for today is that the very first novel written on a typewriter was Tom Sawyer. I'll do one more. Frank Baum came up with the name Oz because he looked at his filing cabinet and saw A through N and O through Z. It was delightful to have you here. I've loved all the things that you had to say, and I really can't wait to read the two that I haven't read yet.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. It was great to be here, and I am excited to spread the word about the pilot's daughter, and I hope you enjoy it.
Absolutely. So a big thank you to Meredith Jaeger and KCAT Radio.
You just heard Lit with Lloyd here on KCAT Radio. Explore all our KCAT original programming at kcat.org/radio.